Chapter 11. Mama Queen. If Fluttershy's initial scream of bewilderment and shock hadn't been enough to confuse her friends, her follow-up shout only made things worse.
What do you mean I'm the mother?
From across the street, several other people that were going about their daily routines looked in her direction with perplexed faces, clearly not sure what to make of her words. Many of them picked up the pace and put some distance between them and the screaming teenager with the butter-colored skin. After a few seconds of quiet, Fluttershy finally noticed the wide range of expressions her friends were giving her. Most of them were either shocked, confused, or in the case of Pinkie Pie, almost playful. Suddenly blushing extremely heavily, Fluttershy gulped to force down the lump in her throat while putting on a crooked, forced grin.
I'm sorry for shouting.
She apologized to everyone that could hear her.
My ear will never be the same, but it's alright. Sorry, I should have dropped that bombshell on you a little more gently. It's BB. He can talk.
Eventide replied from the other end of the line, his tone apologetic. Fluttershy's crooked smile immediately disappeared and was replaced with a blank look when she processed the last 3 words Eventide had said. She shifted on her feet and cleared her throat.
He can what?
She asked hesitantly. Had she heard him right? Turned out she had, as Eventide's following response made evident.
Talk. BB can talk. He's been very vocal the last few days, and, well, a little while ago, he called me Daddy. BB can talk. He's not an animal.
For a few moments, Fluttershy was utterly silent. Her free hand subconsciously moved to rest over her heart, which had just increased its tempo dramatically. She rolled this revelation around in her head for a few seconds, and was about ready to dismiss it as a bad joke when she heard an indistinct babble from the other end of the line. It was fuzzy and distant, like it was far away from the phone, but she knew the voice. It was BB.
Oh my.
Fluttershy whispered, her free hand reaching up from her chest to twirl a stray lock of hair around her index finger.
What all has he said?
She asked after a few more seconds of trying to get her thoughts together and hearing more indistinct babbles from BB.
The only things he's managed to say properly so far are Dada, Daddy, and Queen. He keeps trying to emulate the sounds I'm making, so I get the feeling he doesn't really know what any of the words mean.
Fluttershy's face lit up like a Christmas tree as she heard the word Daddy.
Oh, I see. Now it makes sense why you said I'm the mother.
She noted with a measure of relief and amusement slipping into her still disbelieving voice.
Yeah, sorry about that. Still kind of trying to believe it myself over here.
Eventide apologized with a sheepish chuckle. Another babble came through, and Fluttershy could hear Eventide chuckle at it.
He just tried to say believe. It came out as beef.
Fluttershy's expression continued to soften from what she was hearing, her shock from a moment ago fading away entirely. In its place was a completely new and significantly happier shock.
That's so amazing.
She breathed before a new sound caught her ear. It was Rainbow Dash loudly clearing her throat. Looking up, she saw that all of her friends were still looking at her expectantly. Her blush returned in full force, and she felt a swell of mild panic in her chest.
Oh, can I call you back later, though? I'm kinda...
She glanced at her friends anxiously, some of which were starting to look rather impatient.
with my friends.
Eventide was silent on the other end of the line for a few moments. When he spoke again, Fluttershy's face suddenly hardened with severe disapproval.
Eventide! What's your language?
Rarity perked up at that, her eyes lighting up with recognition.
Eventide? Didn't he used to go to school with us?
She asked, looking over at Pinkie Pie.
Yeah, he and Fluttershy got along really well.
the pink teenager replied enthusiastically, clapping her hands together.
I thought you two lost touch.
Rainbow nodded.
He did graduate a couple years ago. I kind of forgot he existed, if we're being honest.
Applejack frowned at her. Sunset Shimmer just shrugged.
I never knew him,
she admitted timidly, raising a hand to scratch the back of her head.
I was kind of too focused on, plans.
Before there could be any further commentary, Fluttershy muttered a few hasty farewells before slipping her phone back into her pocket and flashing her friends the widest grin she could.
So, the arcade?
She asked cheerfully, hoping they would forget she had just had that entire conversation. Her hopes would be dashed when Rainbow snorted dismissively.
Fluttershy, come on! You think the first thing in my mind is beating Applejack on a Street Fighter cabinet after all of that? What even was most of that?
She asked while throwing her hands into the air to help demonstrate her confusion. Fluttershy shrank back a little bit, a few stray locks of her hair falling in front of her face.
Oh, I don't want to talk about it right now.
She tried timidly, mentally pleading for them to just drop it. Her eyes darted over to Sunset Shimmer, especially with that concern. And it only grew worse when she thought about where Sunset came from. Rainbow, of course, being one of the two most stubborn people in their circle of friends, trounced only by Applejack in that regard, did not give up her questioning so easily.
No. I'm curious now. You were talking to Eventide Oath, right?
Rainbow, let her be. Applejack cut in before things could go any further. She reached out and tugged on Rainbow's hair, pulling her back. You're making her uncomfortable, she scolded before looking back at Fluttershy sympathetically. Rainbow shot Applejack a dirty glare before yanking her hair out of her hand. She then turned to Fluttershy, her face also bearing an apology on it.
Right. Sorry about that, Flutters. Got carried away, that's all.
Fluttershy shook her head, slowly starting to relax.
It's fine,
she assured them.
Are you willing to talk about it?
Verity asked softly, stepping a little closer.
You're not in any trouble, are you?
Fluttershy was quick to shake her head.
Oh, no, not at all. It's the project I was talking about. I just don't want to talk about it right now because it's kinda, private,
she explained in a slightly more confident tone. Still, the way she allowed one of her legs to lazily swing around bespoke her current discomfort with the topic.
Okie dokie, Loki.
Pinkie Pie ended any further prodding in her typical fashion.
Now come on! We've got arcade games to play. Rarity, I'll be seeing you at the whack-a-mole stations.
And with that, she broke into a jog down the street, leaving the rest of the group to simply shake their heads or roll their eyes at her and continue on their merry way. Fluttershy's conversation with Eventide was not forgotten by any means, but the circle of friends was happy to put it out of their minds for now, in favor of some ticket collecting. This is Buddha. Can you say Buddha? It had been almost 2 hours since Eventide had called Fluttershy to drop the news on her. In that time, he had spent almost every single waking moment showing things to BB and seeing if he could say their names. For a creature under a month old, he was remarkably quick to catch on to sounds. However, the meaning seemed to be utterly lost on him in most cases. The only words he really seemed to understand properly were daddy and queen, which he used interchangeably or together. Now, Eventide was standing with BB held in his arms, looking down at a curious-looking Buddha, who looked back up at them with her chocolate-colored eyes. Eventide gave a small smile and spoke again. Come on, BB. Buddha. Her name is Buddha. BB tried to replicate the syllables he was hearing before bursting into a fit of giggles when Eventide snorted in response. No, she isn't Bubba. She's Buddha.
Bubba!
No. Before they could go any further with that particular line of thought, there was a rapid and heavy knocking on the door. Eventide released BB from his grip, allowing the bug to hover in the air while he went to see who it was. The door swung open to reveal Fluttershy standing there, a happy, if worn out, smile on her face.
Eventide! Hi!
She greeted cheerfully. A giant smile split his face before he stepped aside to let her in. Fluttershy, hey! Sorry if I, made things awkward with you and your friends earlier, he said sheepishly.
Oh, it's fine.
She was quick to brush him off before looking at BB. Her smile only grew when he looked back at her and came zipping forward to tackle her in the chest. She wrapped her arms around him in a warm hug before looking over at Eventide.
So, has he said anything new?
He tried to say Buddha just before you came in. He wound up saying Booba, Eventide replied with a smirk, his eyes locking onto the small chitinous creature with wonder. You know, I'm still really having a hard time believing that BB can talk. As if on cue, BB looked away from Fluttershy to stare at Eventide for a moment, squinting with concentration.
Talk.
He tried a few times to repeat the word, each time getting just a little bit closer. Fluttershy giggled happily upon finally getting to hear his efforts clearly for herself. She gently lifted him up, prompting him to look back at her in curiosity.
Hey there, little guy,
she said softly.
Oh, God.
BB babbled before his hoof reached out to poke Fluttershy playfully on the nose. She recoiled slightly with her face scrunching up, eliciting another delighted bout of laughter from BB, who followed it up with another attempt at speech.
Fluttershy!
Fluttershy's smile returned in full force at that.
No, not Fluttershy. Fluttershy. Fluttershy,
she said slowly, making doubly sure to enunciate.
Flower sing.
BB tried again. He pondered the sound for a moment, before squirming in Fluttershy's hands, prompting her to release him. Back in the air, he turned around and shot over for Eventide's chest, forelegs outstretched.
Dada Queen!
As soon as BB collided with him, Eventide wrapped him up in what felt like the millionth hug that day, his face somewhere between overjoyed and terrified. He held BB close while looking down at him, and then looked up at Fluttershy. So, BB's a person, he awkwardly stated the now abundantly obvious. BB, while not understanding the words, still found his tone mildly amusing. He giggled softly before curling up some more in his adoptive father's protective arms, looking at Fluttershy as he did so. More specifically, once he was settled, he carefully watched her mouth.
That's amazing,
Fluttershy breathed out, walking over to gently pet BB behind the ears again.
Wow. I suppose we have our work cut out for us, huh?
Eventide nodded slowly, looking down at the bug in his arms with no small amount of fear developing in his eyes. Yeah. Totally. His trepidation slipped into his voice, and was not lost on Fluttershy. She gave him a questioning look.
Eventide? Are you okay?
She asked softly. Eventide nodded before gently releasing BB, allowing him to fly over to the coffee table for a landing. Once that was done, Eventide's face fell into his hands with a long groan. I signed up to take care of an animal, Fluttershy. I know I can manage that thanks to Buddha, but... Fluttershy already knew where this was going and was quick to head him off.
Don't, Eventide,
she said sharply, causing him to look up at her in surprise. That surprise grew exponentially when he saw the intensity in her eyes.
Don't go doubting yourself now. For not knowing anything about him, I think you're doing wonderfully.
But he can speak, Eventide pointed out in exasperation. And he's only a few weeks old. How many more surprises am I going to have to juggle?
As many as he throws at you, and you will juggle them all beautifully,
Fluttershy rebuked while reaching out to grab his shoulders.
You said it yourself over the phone. You're a father now. And a good father can't afford to be hesitating now. Not when it comes to his son.
Eventide winced back from her. His face twisted with shame, because she was absolutely right, and shock from how intense she was being right now. He had known she could be incredibly stern and serious, especially when it came to the tiny and innocent. He had seen hints of it here and there over the last few weeks, yes, but this? This was a new level of resolve and curiosity that made him cower away from her. Not quite able to meet her gaze, he gave a sheepish nod. Right. Sorry. I'm just overwhelmed. Fluttershy's expression slowly softened.
I know. But isn't that why I volunteered to help you?
She pointed out before releasing Eventide and taking a few steps back.
If he throws too many surprise balls at you to juggle, you can always try passing a few of them to me. This is a learning experience for both of us, Eventide, not just you. And right now, we are the only ones BB has. All we can do is our best. Together.
Eventide nodded again, this time more sure of himself. He then turned and looked over at BB, who was looking at the two with his head tilted to the side and his glowing eyes squinting at them.
Together,
BB babbled out. Fluttershy looked over at him with a small smile growing on her face.
Mama Queen!
BB suddenly declared while pointing at Fluttershy with an enormous grin on his face. She jumped in surprise, but soon smiled extremely widely. BB's hoof then shot over to Eventide.
Dada Queen!
Not a queen, Eventide grumbled under his breath in mock annoyance. He crossed his arms over his chest before giving Fluttershy a sideways glance and a smirk. So, does this mean we're a family now?
What?
Fluttershy began, her voice trailing off. She looked over at Eventide for a moment, before she burst into a fit of giggles. After a few seconds, she composed herself enough to answer, albeit still between small chortles.
No, I don't think so.
Eventide shrugged. Fair enough. Guess that makes you Aunt Fluttershy more than Mom, huh? He mused absently.
I don't know. Whatever he wants to call me.
Well, he already called you Mama Queen, so maybe that'll stick. A few moments passed in silence, the two humans looking at the curious bug on the coffee table with great interest. He looked back at them as well, his jaw repeatedly flexing and clenching while his tongue occasionally flicked out to lick his lips. I'm gonna have to buy him kid stuff, aren't I? Eventide asked in realization. You know, like crib, cradle, toys, books.
Bugs!
BB proclaimed. Fluttershy chuckled.
Adopted or not, you've got a son now. Probably a good idea to go all out.
Eventide slowly nodded, mulling that around in his head for a few minutes. As the seconds passed him by, an idea slowly began to spring up in his mind. All right. Well, I think I might be able to throw something together for him, he muttered, already starting to do the math in his head. Fluttershy glanced at him curiously.
What are you planning?
If he's my son by adoption, and he's fully sapient and intelligent, then sooner or later he's gonna need his own room. Somewhere to keep his things, place to be alone if he needs some space, and somewhere to hide if there are strangers in the house. Eventide turned to face down the hall, where the door to his basement looked back at him, closed and completely unused since BB hatched. It'll be a lot of work, but what place could be better than where he came from? Fluttershy leaned over to look at his basement door, her brow furrowing in thought.
You think you can really make it work?
She questioned skeptically. She quickly regretted her choice of words, though, her expression softening apologetically.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to be rude. I'm sure you can do it.
Eventide laughed and lightly, playfully punched her in the shoulder, while walking for the basement door in question. Don't worry about it. As I said, it's gonna be a lot of work. Probably need to get some help to get it done too, but if I can pull it off. As he finished, he pulled open the door to stare down the old wooden steps. He then looked back at Fluttershy. Bibi was just behind her, hovering over her shoulder and watching him inquisitively. Eventide's smile grew. Then my basement bug will really have a place he can call his.